The throne room of Prime was the most beautiful place in 40 star systems. Giant crystals grew from the floor and ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Light danced through them and painted the walls in colors that had no names in human language. The air smelled sweet, like flowers from a dream, and soft music played from somewhere deep within the crystal walls. Queen sat on her throne at the center of it all. She was 9 feet tall, with 6 arms and skin that glowed soft blue like the moon on a clear night. Her eyes were large and black, and they had watched empires rise and fall for 800 years. She was called the Eternal, and she had earned that name through blood and conquest. Around her stood her court. Hundreds of nobles filled the great hall, each one tall and beautiful and cruel. They had conquered species beyond counting. They had crushed rebellions, burned worlds, and built an empire that stretched across the stars. Nothing surprised them anymore. Nothing scared them. Until the human walked in. The doors at the far end of the throne room opened, and the guards announced the arrival of the human delegation. Everyone turned to look, expecting a group of ambassadors in fine clothes, carrying gifts and wearing fear on their faces. That was how it always went. New species came to beg, and Queen decided if they would live or die. But there was only one human. He walked alone across the crystal floor. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. He was short by standards, maybe 5 feet and 10 inches tall. His hair was cut close to his head. He wore a simple black uniform with no decorations, no medals, no signs of rank except for a small patch on his shoulder that showed a simple star. His name was Commander Elias Vance, and he did not bow. Queen leaned forward on her throne. Her 4 upper arms rested on the armrests while her 2 lower arms folded across her stomach. She studied this strange little creature with growing amusement. "This is what humanity sends," she said. Her voice rang through the hall like music, but there was sharp mockery underneath. "One small, silent creature, we expected ambassadors, we expected generals, we expected someone worthy of our attention." The court laughed. The sound filled the throne room, bouncing off the crystals, growing louder and louder. Hundreds of nobles pointed and mocked and showed their sharp teeth in cruel smiles. Elias Vance stood in the center of that laughter and said nothing. His face showed no emotion. His pale eyes moved slowly across the room, looking at each noble, each guard, each crystal pillar. He was studying them, the queen realized, measuring them, like a farmer counting sheep before a slaughter. The thought made her uncomfortable, and that made her angry. "Do you not speak human?" she demanded. "Has fear stolen your voice? Your species has stumbled into our territory, and now the swarm comes for us all. They will eat your colonies. They will eat every man, woman, and child of your pathetic species. And you send one silent man to ask for help." The laughter grew louder. Some nobles were crying from amusement. Others were holding their stomachs. It was the greatest joke they had heard in centuries. Elias waited for the laughter to fade. It took a long time. When the throne room was finally quiet again, he spoke. "I am not here to negotiate." His voice was soft, almost gentle, like a father talking to a child. But something in that softness made the nearest nobles step back. Something in those quiet words carried weight that they could not understand. Queen narrowed her black eyes. "Then why are you here, little human?" "To observe." "Observe what?" Elias looked directly at her. His eyes met her black ones, and she felt something strange. It took her a moment to recognize it because it had been so long since she had felt it. "A challenge." "I am here to observe," he said, "whether you are worth saving." The silence that followed was absolute. No one laughed now. No one moved. The crystals themselves seemed to stop their soft singing. Every in the room stared at the small human who had just spoken to their queen as if she were the one being judged. Queen rose from her throne. She was magnificent in her anger, glowing brighter, her 6 arms spreading wide. She walked down the steps toward him, each step making the floor shake slightly. When she stood before him, she towered over him like a mountain over a mouse. "You dare," she whispered. "You dare speak to the eternal queen of the Dominion as if you are the one with power here. Your species is young, your ships are weak, your bodies are fragile, you have nothing, you are nothing." Elias tilted his head back to look up at her. He did not step back, he did not tremble. "My species is young," he agreed. "Barely 300 years in space. Your empire is older than our recorded history. Your technology is beyond our understanding. Your warriors have conquered worlds while we were still learning to walk. Then you admit your weakness." I admit our youth. Something changed in his eyes. Something dark moved behind them. But we have learned lessons in our short time that your ancient empire has never needed to learn. We have stood at the edge of extinction, not once but many times. We have lost everything and rebuilt from ashes. We have faced the darkness that you have never seen. The queen laughed, but it was not a real laugh. There was no humor in it. What darkness could your small species have faced that compares to the swarm? They have eaten civilizations far older than yours. Elias smiled. It was a small, sad smile, and it did not reach his eyes. The swarm is coming, he said. They will be here sooner than you think. When they arrive, you will understand what I mean. You will see what humanity has become, and you will finally understand why our bodies are fragile, our ships are few, and our lives are short, and yet we are still here. He turned and began to walk toward the doors. Where are you going? The queen demanded. We have not dismissed you. Elias did not stop. He did not look back. I will be in my quarters, he said. When the storm comes, you will send for me, and then we will see what your ancient empire is truly made of. He walked out of the throne room, and the doors closed behind him, and Queen stood in the silence and felt something she had not felt in 800 years. Doubt the queen did not send for Commander Vance the next day. Instead, she sent orders to make him suffer. They were masters of breaking minds. They had done it to countless species over thousands of years. They knew how to find the cracks in any creature's spirit and pry them open until nothing remained but fear and obedience. They started with the simple things. They took away his food. They took away his water. They moved him to a small room deep in the palace where no light could reach. The walls were thick stone, and the silence was complete. Most beings went mad within hours, screaming and begging and clawing at the walls. Elias Vance sat in the darkness and said nothing. On the second day, they sent psychics. They had powerful minds, able to push their thoughts into other beings like knives into soft flesh. They pressed against the human's mind, searching for fears, for weaknesses, for anything they could use. They pushed harder than they had ever pushed before, hard enough to shatter the sanity of any known species. They found walls. Not just walls, fortresses. Deep inside the human's mind were defenses that should not have existed. They were not natural. They were not taught. They were built from something darker, something older. They were built from suffering so deep that it had become armor. The psychics retreated with bleeding noses and shaking hands. They reported to the queen that they could not break him. Some of them refused to try again. On the third day, Queen went to see him herself. The door to his cell opened and light spilled into the darkness. Elias sat against the far wall, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and steady. He had not moved from that spot in 3 days. He had not eaten. He had not drunk. He had not made a single sound. And yet when the queen looked at him, she did not see a broken man. She saw someone resting, someone waiting, someone who had been through worse than this and had survived. "What are you?" she asked. He opened his eyes. They were calm like still water. "I am human." "That tells me nothing." She stepped into the cell, her glow pushing back the shadows. "My psychics cannot read your mind. My torturers cannot break your spirit. You sit in darkness without food or water, and you do not beg. You do not cry. You do not fear. What kind of creature is this?" Elias stood slowly. His movements were stiff from sitting so long, but there was no weakness in them. He looked at her with those eyes, and she felt again that strange sensation of being studied, measured, judged. "Your empire is old," he said. "You have conquered many species, but you have never faced extinction. You have never known what it is to be truly afraid. We have fought wars that burned planets. Wars you won, wars you knew you could win." He took a step toward her, and she almost stepped back before catching herself. "Humanity is different. We did not conquer our way to the stars. We crawled there. We fought and bled and died, not against other species, but against ourselves. We have killed more of our own kind than your empire has killed in all its wars combined." The queen narrowed her eyes. "That is not something to be proud of." "I am not proud of it." His voice was quiet, almost sad. "But it taught us something that your people have never needed to learn. It taught us how to survive when survival should be impossible. It taught us how to fight when all hope is gone. It taught us how to look into the darkness and keep walking." He moved to the small window in the cell door, looking out at the crystal halls beyond. "You asked what kind of creature I am. I am the kind that learned to fear the dark. Every night when we were young and weak and had no fire to protect us, we heard things moving in the shadows. Things with claws, things with hunger. We could not see them, but we knew they were there, and we knew they wanted to eat us. He turned back to face her. So we learned to make weapons from stones. We learned to build fires that pushed back the night. We learned to work together even when we hated each other, because alone we were food and together we were something else, something dangerous. And when the darkness could no longer kill us, we did not stop. We kept building, kept learning, kept fighting, because we remembered the fear even when there was nothing left to fear. The queen was silent for a long moment. She had lived for 800 years. She had seen things that would drive most beings mad, but she had never heard anyone speak about fear like this, not as a weakness but as a teacher, not as something to overcome but as something to remember. "The swarm," she said slowly. "They are coming for your worlds too. Do you not fear them?" "Yes." The simple answer surprised her. "Then why do you sit here? Why do you not beg for alliance? Why do you not plead for help?" Ilya smiled that small, sad smile again. "Because we have been where you are about to be. We have stood at the edge of destruction and looked over. We know what it does to a species. It breaks some. It makes others strong." He paused. "We are here to see which kind you are." Before the queen could answer, the palace shook. The crystals in the walls screamed, a sound she had never heard before. Alarms began to wail, and red light flooded the corridors. Soldiers ran past the cell door, shouting orders, their weapons drawn. The queen touched the communicator on her wrist. "Report." The voice that answered was terrified. "My queen, the swarm, they have arrived. Millions of ships are entering the system." "That is impossible. Our scouts said they were weeks away." "The scouts were wrong, my queen. They are here, they are everywhere. The orbital defenses are already falling. We cannot stop them. We cannot." The communication cut off in static. Queen stood frozen. For 800 years, she had known only victory. For 800 years, she had been the one who brought fear, not the one who felt it. Now, standing in a dark cell with a silent human, she felt the ground beneath her certainty begin to crack. Ilya's Vance watched her face, watched the fear bloom in her ancient eyes, and he nodded slowly. "Now you understand," he said. "Now you begin to see. The darkness is here, queen of the things with claws and hunger are at your door, and everything you thought you knew is about to burn." He walked past her, out of the cell, into the red-lit chaos of the corridor. She stood alone in the darkness for a long moment, listening to the screams of her dying empire before she finally followed. The sky was burning. Ilya stood at the great window of the palace and watched the swarm descend on Prime. The ships were not like any ships he had seen before. They were alive, grown from black chitin and purple flesh, with wings that beat against the vacuum of space and mouths that opened to swallow smaller vessels whole. There were millions of them, blocking out the stars, turning the bright sky into a ceiling of writhing darkness. The orbital defenses fired. Great beams of crystal energy cut through the swarm, destroying hundreds of ships with each blast. But for every ship that died, 1,000 more took its place. The swarm did not care about losses. The swarm did not know fear. The swarm only knew hunger. Around Ilya's, the palace was in chaos. Nobles ran through the crystal halls, screaming, pushing, fighting each other to reach the evacuation shuttles. Soldiers tried to hold defensive positions, but their lines kept breaking as more and more swarm drones crashed through the walls. The beautiful throne room was already gone, buried under a mountain of black chitin and dead bodies. An officer grabbed Ilya's by the arm. The officer was young, his glow flickering with terror, his 4 upper arms shaking. "Human, the evacuation shuttles are in the rear courtyard. The Queen has ordered all important personnel to evacuate. You must come with me." Ilya's gently removed the officer's hand from his arm. "No." "What, did you not hear me? The palace is falling, the city is falling. If you stay here, you will die." "I heard you." Ilya's was looking at a small device on his wrist. It looked simple, just a black screen with some numbers on it, but his eyes were focused on it with complete attention. "How many civilians are still in the capital?" The officer blinked, confused by the question. "What? I do not know. Millions, perhaps. There was no time to evacuate. The swarm came too fast." "Millions?" Ilya's nodded slowly. He pressed something on his wrist device and a soft beep answered him. "Get your people to the shuttles. You have 11 minutes. 11 minutes until what?" But Ilya's was already walking away, toward the main gates of the palace, toward the sound of screaming and gunfire and dying. The officer watched him go, unable to understand, then turned and ran the other way. The gates of the palace had been beautiful once. Giant crystal doors carved with the history of the Dominion, showing their greatest victories, their proudest moments. Now they were shattered, lying in pieces on the blood-soaked ground. Swarm drones poured through the opening, their black bodies clicking and hissing, their many legs carrying them forward like a tide of nightmares. Elias walked through the broken gates. The drones saw him immediately. Thousands of red eyes turned toward him, and the hive mind that controlled them felt curiosity. This was strange. This small creature was not running, it was not fighting. It was walking calmly into the heart of the swarm as if it belonged there. The drones hesitated. They had eaten many species. They had learned to predict the behavior of prey. Some ran, some fought, some froze in terror, but none had ever done this. None had ever walked toward the swarm with such perfect calm, such absolute purpose. In that moment of hesitation, Elias spoke into his wrist device. "Prometheus, this is Vance. Confirm position." A voice crackled back through the tiny speaker. It was a human voice, calm and professional. "Confirmed, Commander. 17 vessels holding at upper atmosphere, waiting for your signal." Signal given. Elias looked up at the burning sky, at the millions of swarm ships blocking out the sun. "Show them what we are." "Understood, Commander. Beginning atmospheric entry. May God have mercy on us all." "God has nothing to do with it," Elias said quietly. "This is just math." He kept walking. The swarm drones recovered from their hesitation and began to move toward him. 100 black shapes rushed across the ground, their claws raised, their mouths open. They would reach him in seconds. They would tear him apart, and the hive mind would learn nothing from this strange prey except that it had been foolish. Then the sky screamed. Elias had seen many things in his life. He had fought in wars that burned planets. He had watched friends die in his arms. He had stood on the bridge of his ship and given orders that killed thousands of enemies and hundreds of his own people. But he had never seen anything like this. 17 human warships fell through the atmosphere. Not descended, not entered, fell. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel inside the planet's atmosphere, something that every species in the galaxy knew was suicide. The gravitational forces alone should have torn them apart. The friction should have burned them to ash. The shock waves should have destroyed everything for miles around. But humans had done the math. They had calculated exactly how fast to go, exactly what angle to enter, exactly how to shape their shields to survive the impossible. They had trained for years, flying simulations that killed them 1,000 times, until they knew every variable, every danger, every tiny adjustment needed to make suicide into survival. The ships fell like avenging angels, trailing fire and thunder, and their weapons were already firing before they leveled out. Swarm exploded by the thousands. The great hive ships, each one the size of a small moon, broke apart under concentrated fire. The sky that had been dark with enemies was suddenly bright with burning flesh. The drones around Elias stopped. The hive mind controlling them felt something new, something it had not felt in 10,000 years of conquest. Pain. The swarm was connected. Every drone, every ship, every creature was linked to the greater mind. When ships died in orbit, the drones on the ground felt it. When thousands of swarm creatures burned in seconds, the pain echoed through the entire network. Elias kept walking. He was not alone anymore. Drop pods were falling around him, slamming into the ground with enough force to kill anything beneath them. Human soldiers in powered armor emerged from the pods, their weapons firing before their feet touched the ground. They moved like water around rocks, flowing past each other, covering each other, killing everything that moved. They did not advance in lines like they did not swarm like they moved as individuals who thought together, each one making their own decisions, each one supporting the others without needing orders. It was chaos that looked like art. It was violence that looked like dancing. A drone lunged at Elias. A soldier shot it out of the air without breaking stride. A crash toward them, burning and broken from the battle above. The soldiers did not even look up as fighters screamed overhead and reduced it to falling ash before it could crush them. Elias walked through it all, untouched, heading toward the center of the swarm's landing zone. His soldiers followed, leaving a trail of dead enemies behind them. The hive mind watched through a million eyes and could not understand. How were they doing this? How were these small, fragile creatures destroying everything the swarm threw at them? How were they walking through a storm that should have killed them 1,000 times? And then Elias reached the center and he stopped, and he pulled a small metal device from his belt. It was simple, just a cylinder with some buttons on it. He drove it into the ground like a stake. The swarm screamed. Not the drones, the mind itself. The great consciousness that connected every creature felt something pierce it, something sharp and terrible and wrong. It tried to understand what was happening, but the thing in its mind was not a weapon. It was a memory. Human memory. And it burned. The device Elias drove into the ground was called a memory spike. It was humanity's most terrible weapon, and they had never used it before. They had hoped they would never need to. The spike was connected to a network of human minds, thousands of volunteers who had offered their memories to be recorded, compressed, and turned into a weapon. Not just any memories, the worst memories, the darkest moments of human history preserved forever so that no one would forget. Now those memories poured into the hive mind like poison into blood. The swarm saw through human eyes for the first time. They felt what humans had felt. They experienced what humans had experienced, and they understood, finally, what kind of species they had attacked. They saw the first wars, when humans fought with stones and sticks, killing each other over food and water and fear. They felt the hatred and the rage and the desperate hunger that drove brother to murder brother. They saw bodies piled in fields, left to rot because there was no one left to bury them. They saw the great empires rise and fall, each one built on blood, each one leaving behind mountains of dead. They saw slavery and torture and cruelty beyond anything the swarm had ever imagined. They saw humans hurt their own kind in ways that served no purpose except pain. They saw the world wars when humans had learned to kill not just with hands and swords but with machines. They felt the trenches, the mud and blood and gas, the endless grinding death that went on for years. They saw cities burn. They saw millions die in camps, murdered simply for being different. They saw the nuclear fire, the bright flash that erased cities in seconds, the radiation that poisoned the land for generations. They felt the fear of a species that had built weapons capable of destroying itself, and they felt the cold decision to build more. They saw the colony wars, when humans had reached the stars and immediately begun killing each other again. They felt the vacuum of space tear at human lungs, the cold death of ships cut open to the void. They saw battles fought across moons and asteroids, each one leaving behind frozen corpses that would orbit forever. And through it all, they felt something else. Something the swarm had never encountered in 10,000 years of consuming species across the galaxy. They felt humans refuse to die. Every war, every disaster, every moment when extinction seemed certain, humans found a way to survive. They crawled through blood and fire. They sacrificed everything, gave everything, destroyed parts of themselves that could never be rebuilt. But they kept going. They kept fighting. They would not stop. The swarm had eaten species that begged for mercy. They had eaten species that fought with courage. They had eaten species that tried to negotiate, to flee, to hide. But they had never eaten a species that simply would not accept defeat. They had never faced a prey that looked at death and said no. The hive mind recoiled from the memories. It tried to push them out to cut the connection, but the spike was buried too deep. The human pain kept flowing, kept burning, kept showing the swarm the truth of what it had challenged. And then the memories showed them the final thing, the thing that humans never spoke about, the thing that they carried in their hearts like a secret fire. The promise. Every human child learned it, even if no one taught them the words. It was written in their bones, coded in their blood, passed down through 1,000 generations of survivors. It was the lesson learned in caves while things with claws hunted in the dark. It was the oath sworn on battlefields when all hope was lost. We will not go quietly. We will not surrender. We will make you pay for every inch, every mile, every world. And if you destroy us, if you burn our last city and kill our last child, we will drag you down with us. We will wrap our hands around your throat and pull you into the grave. We will make sure that our death is your death too. You can kill us, but you will never forget us, and you will never be safe again. The swarm felt that promise, and for the first time in its ancient existence, it knew fear. The local hive mind collapsed. The psychic network that controlled millions of drones shattered under the weight of human memory. Across the city, across the continent, swarm creatures fell where they stood. Their connection to the greater mind was gone, cut off by trauma too deep to process. Their individual brains were too small, too simple to function alone. They twitched and clicked and died, their eyes going dark, their legs folding beneath them. Elias stood in the center of a circle of dead enemies and breathed. His soldiers formed a perimeter around him, their weapons still raised, their eyes scanning for threats. But there were no threats left. The ground was covered with black chitin bodies, millions of them, all dead or dying. The sky was filled with burning ships, swarm vessels that had lost their coordination and crashed into each other or fell into the atmosphere like meteors. Prometheus, Elias said into his communicator, "Status." "Orbital superiority achieved, Commander." The voice was tired but satisfied. "Remaining swarm forces are in full retreat. They are leaving the system at maximum speed. Casualties on our side are within acceptable parameters." "Define acceptable." A pause, 2,317 dead, 4,000 wounded, 3 ships destroyed, 2 more badly damaged. Elias closed his eyes. He knew that each number was a person. Each one was someone who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not come back. Each one was a mother's child, a friend, a lover, a life cut short so that other lives could continue. "Get the wounded to medical ships. Recover what bodies you can, the rest." He looked at the destruction around him. "The rest we leave for the to bury." "Understood, Commander. What about you?" Elias looked toward the palace in the distance. It was still standing, though barely. The crystal walls were cracked and broken, the beautiful spires collapsed, the gardens burned. But the evacuation shuttles were launching from the rear courtyard, carrying survivors to safety. "I have one more thing to do," he said. "Vance out." He began walking toward the palace, stepping over the bodies of enemies and allies alike. His soldiers fell in behind him, protecting him without being asked, ready to die for him without being ordered. That was the human way. That was what the swarm had never understood. Humans did not fight because they were told to. They fought because they chose to. They fought because they looked at the person next to them and decided that person was worth dying for. They fought because love and loyalty and stubborn refusal to quit were stronger than any hive mind, any psychic control, any force in the universe. The swarm had numbers. The swarm had coordination. The swarm had 10,000 years of victory. But humans had something else. They had each other. And that, in the end, was enough. Elias reached the palace gates and paused. Behind him, the city burned. Above him, the sky was clear for the first time in hours, the swarm ships gone, the stars visible again. In front of him, the crystal doors lay shattered, but beyond them he could see movement. Survivors emerging from their hiding places, looking at the destruction with eyes that could not understand what had happened. He took a deep breath and walked inside. It was time to speak with the queen. The throne room was destroyed. The great crystals that had grown from floor to ceiling for 1,000 years were shattered, their pieces scattered across the ground like broken teeth. The walls were cracked, the ceiling had collapsed in places, and the beautiful light that had once danced through the room was gone. Instead, there was only the red glow of fires burning in the distance and the pale light of stars through the holes in the roof. Queen sat on what remained of her throne. The great chair had been broken, half of it crushed under a fallen pillar, but she had cleared enough space to sit. Around her lay the bodies of her royal guards, warriors who had fought to protect her until their last breath. Their glow had faded, leaving them and still. She looked up when Elias walked through the shattered doors. He was wounded now. She could see burns on his arms where swarm acid had touched him. There was a deep cut on his forehead and dried blood covered half his face. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. His uniform was torn and stained with blood that was not all his own. But his eyes were the same, calm, watchful, like storm clouds, seeing everything, judging everything. He stopped a few feet from her broken throne and looked at her. He did not bow. He had not bowed when he first arrived, and he would not bow now. She understood, finally, that he would never bow to anyone. "You knew," she said. Her voice was hoarse from smoke and screaming. "You knew the swarm was coming early. Your scouts had better information than ours. You could have warned us." "Yes. You used us as bait. You let us believe we had time. You let us be unprepared. And then you let the swarm attack, let them kill millions of my people, let them destroy my city before you finally showed your true strength." "Yes." She should have been angry. She should have risen from her broken throne and tried to kill him with her bare hands. 800 years ago she would have, but something had changed in her during this terrible night. Something had broken that she was not sure could ever be fixed. Why? She asked. We could have prepared, we could have evacuated the civilians, we could have positioned our fleet, millions of lives could have been saved. Why did you let them die? Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Not the tiredness of a man who needed sleep, but the tiredness of someone who had carried a heavy weight for a very long time. Because you needed to learn. Learn what? How to lose. How to watch my people die. How to feel helpless while everything I built burned around me. Yes, he took a step closer and she saw something in his eyes that she had not seen before. It was not victory, it was not satisfaction, it was sadness, deep and old. Exactly that. He turned and looked at the destruction around them, at the broken crystals and dead bodies and smoldering fires. Your empire is ancient. You have conquered 100 species. You have won every war, crushed every enemy, built a kingdom that spans 40 star systems. But you have never known what it feels like to be helpless. To watch your world burn and know that you cannot stop it. To feel the darkness closing in and understand that there is nothing you can do. He turned back to face her. Humanity has, many times. We have stood where you stand now. We have looked at the ashes of everything we loved and asked ourselves how we could go on. We have buried our dead and wondered if we would be next. We have faced extinction not once, not twice, but over and over again throughout our history. And what did you learn from that? We learned that there are two kinds of species in the universe. The first kind looks at destruction and gives up. They accept that they are beaten. They surrender, or they run, or they simply lie down and wait to die. Those species do not last long. He paused, and something cold moved behind his eyes. The second kind looks at destruction and gets angry. They look at the darkness and refuse to accept it. They bury their dead and pick up weapons and fight, even when there is no hope, even when fighting is pointless, even when the math says they should be dead 1,000 times over. They fight because they refuse to give the universe the satisfaction of killing them easily. And humanity is the second kind. Yes, we are the species that learned to fear the dark and then learned to become it. We are the species that was hunted and became hunters. We are the species that was supposed to die 1,000 times and is still here, still fighting, still refusing to go quietly into the night. He walked closer to her throne, stepping over the bodies of her guards until he stood directly in front of her. The swarm will return, not soon. The damage we did today will take them years to recover from, maybe decades. But they will come back, they always do. They are patient and they are hungry and they have been eating civilizations for 10,000 years. And what are we supposed to do when they return? You have a choice. He held up one finger. You can fight them the way you have always fought, with pride and power and the belief that you are superior. You can send your fleets and your armies and trust in your ancient technology and your experience, and you will lose, because the swarm does not care about pride. They will eat your fleets, they will eat your armies, they will eat your entire species, and they will not even remember your name. He held up a second finger. Or you can fight them the way we do, with everything you have, everything you are willing to sacrifice. You can learn to fear the dark again. You can remember what it feels like to be prey. And you can use that fear, that memory, to become something stronger than you have ever been before. He lowered his hand. We did not come here to save you, Queen. We came here to teach you. Tonight was the first lesson. You have felt the darkness now. You have looked into the eyes of extinction. The question is what you will do with that experience. He turned and began to walk toward the door. Wait, the Queen said. Her voice was stronger now, steadier. That is it. You destroy my world, kill millions of my people, and then you just leave. Elias stopped at the threshold. He did not turn around. We have given you what you needed. The rest is up to you. You can hate us for tonight. You can blame us for the deaths. You can spend the next century plotting revenge. He paused. Or you can remember what you felt when the sky turned black and the swarm came down. You can remember how small you felt, how helpless, how afraid. And you can decide that you will never feel that way again. He looked back over his shoulder, and she saw that sad smile on his face again. We will be watching. If you become strong, if you learn the lesson, we will stand with you when the swarm returns. But if you go back to what you were, if you forget the fear and return to your pride and your contempt, he shook his head, then we will not waste more lives trying to save you. He walked out of the throne room, into the smoke and fire of the ruined city. She watched him go, this small, fragile creature who had destroyed her certainty as completely as the swarm had destroyed her palace. For a long time, Queen sat alone in the ruins of everything she had known. She thought about pride. She thought about fear. She thought about the darkness that had almost swallowed her world. And then slowly she stood. Her legs were shaky. Her body ached. Her heart was full of grief for everyone she had lost. But she was still alive. Her people were still alive, and she had learned something tonight that 800 years of victory had never taught her. She had learned what it meant to survive. In the distance, she could see the human ships rising into the sky, their mission complete, their lesson delivered. She watched them go, and she did not feel hatred. She did not feel desire for revenge. She felt something else, something new. Respect. And perhaps in time, gratitude. The darkness was coming, the swarm would return, but now she knew what she was facing. Now she understood what it would take to survive, and now she had something she had never had before. A teacher. She walked out of the throne room, into the burning city, and began to rebuild.